Hand over the mic to Rosanne Haggerty, our CEO of Community Solutions, and Terri Akey, the senior researcher at ORS.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you all for joining us. It's such a joy to get to interact, even virtually, with folks who are doing such heroic and successful work. It just seems like a really propitious moment as HMIS and PIT data is being released, and there is such a flattening of homelessness. I think all of the work that you and others have been doing, it's now showing the results that we know are possible and achievable. And so there's really a lot to be proud of, a lot to lift up, and a lot to appreciate in joining with you for this overview of how we are taking on board information that you've given us about what's working, what isn't, the challenges, and from the point of view of just having an outstanding research partner like ORS Impact, what we should be doing, what we can be doing to make you all, your communities in the country more successful. Um, I'm delighted to give a little bit of an overview of our relationship with ORS and Terri and the kind of organization they are. And Terri will go into the details of what we've been learning in our evaluation work with you. You've all contributed insights on your experience and challenges, and also the robust sort of overview research that Terri and her team have done. Um, we are one of the reasons we are very grateful to have had the privilege of the MacArthur 100 and Change grant is that it has enabled us to do this kind of rigorous research and evaluation in real time over the last 4 years, and we're moving into the final year of the grant and the evaluation. But what causes ORS to stand apart and why we selected them was that they are a developmental researcher. They aren't the kind of researcher that just waits to see how things worked out, follow things on a longitudinal basis. But we meet with them monthly, even more frequently, to really get a sense of what they are, the signals they're picking up, their interpretation of the data, their feedback, and how they are aggregating it from conversations they have with community leaders. And so our ability to course correct and to be in the position to be as helpful as we possibly can be to your efforts has a lot to do with the kind of strength and rigor and availability to kind of learn in real time with us that ORS brings to this relationship. So thrilled to introduce our friend Terri, who with her team have been working with us and with you for the last 4 years. Terri's going to share really the last 2 years of evaluation insights that have caused us to really make some meaningful shifts in how we focus our work. And just before turning it over to Terri, our goal throughout this whole strategic plan and this MacArthur process that you've been part of with Built for Zero is really to move the country closer to what we almost think of as a tipping point. Like, how would we know that we are getting on the other side of what we know to be true? That this is an issue that we can reduce, that we can get to a solution, meaning homelessness is genuinely rare and brief. And the components of that we believe are there's a proven roadmap, and your work and your participation in the evaluation helps to document that there is powerful evidence of reductions in homelessness. And we'll say more about what we've learned about the nature of those reductions and the credibility of those reductions. We know that there needs to be a measurable shift in public opinion toward understanding this to be a solvable problem. And we know that we need to see enabling policies moving in the direction of supporting outcomes and continued powerful investment in the work. And so ORS is really helping us to regularly gain insight into whether that's happening and what else needs to be done. So, Terri, thank you so much for joining us and for all you've
Mhm.
contributed to the movement. And I'm just going to ask you to maybe lead the group through the key insights of the last round of direct to community interviews and the overview research that you have drawn on to advise us.
Yeah, thank you, Roseanne, for that, and welcome. It's great to see so many folks on the call, and I'm happy to be here. Just a quick, just so you all know, I'm Terri Akey. I'm here at ORS as a senior director. Um, and we've been working with Community Solutions for the last 4.5 years on this wonderful evaluation. It's been a really exciting journey to walk side by side with the organization as you all have been putting out hypotheses about how do we get to rare and brief homelessness? What is it going to take? And so we've been able to be really good thought partners along the way in watching that journey evolve and all of the learning that is coming out of the work with each of you as communities and trying to understand what is going to be the best way to do this. So what I wanted to do today is the insights I'm going to share come from two different kind of sources. This is year 4 of the evaluation, or year 5 of the evaluation. Much of what I'm going to talk about came from conversations with many of you in 2024, early 2025, and a lot of desk research and other kinds of um, analysis that we did during last year to try to understand where are the opportunities for the strategy to shift and to really be getting the most leverage, the most power to make changes. And so I'm going to start with some of the insights that we got from the desk research. Many of these will not be surprise to any of you. You all are in this work on the ground and feel this probably much, much more deeply than we do. But it also helps set the stage for some of the things that Rosanne is going to talk about in terms of the ways that she's thinking and the organization is thinking about the work. And then I'll share some insights from the actual conversations with you all, some of the evaluation pieces that we've done so that you can kind of see that as well. So I'll just quickly kind of talk about those two places, and then I will pass it back to Rosanne to talk to her about what is coming out of that. So we did do last year. We spent quite a bit of time trying to understand the external context um, of the homelessness efforts, and that external context was both at the federal level, which has been particularly unstable over the last year or so, as well as trying to understand from each of the communities that we have talked to in the past, what are the enabling conditions within local settings that are supporting um, success, and what are the conditions that are providing barriers. So out of that analysis and some of that research, we, of course, identify that homelessness is rising. We all know that. Nearly 75% of the COCs saw increases from 2020 to 2024, while only 3% saw decreases. And this is looking at the PIT data. Unsheltered homelessness is particularly important because it drives public perception, political will, and narrative. Even when housing numbers improve, we still see this issue around unsheltered homelessness and the public nature of that, and how the public responds to that. Large cities are struggling more acutely and have steeper increases in homelessness than other communities, which makes sense. One of the things we did identify that veterans are the one bright spot. We are still seeing overall reductions in veterans' homelessness, particularly with built for zero states, some of them nearly ending veteran homelessness entirely. So this veterans gives us a sort of a bright spot anchor to kind of think about, how we can expand that out. It's widely attributed that the success is, the sustained public goodwill towards the veterans, kind of a federal focus and coordinated efforts with other cross-sector partners. So it gives us a kind of a blueprint to kind of think about for other populations as well. Another big event that we are all feeling is the federal policy disruption, which has been pretty severe. And with the new administration, we have seen lots of transitions in actually how the feds are treating homelessness. The USICH was effectively eliminated, as we all know. There was a lot of kind of uncertainty and lack of clarity around the NOFO process for the new COC granting, dropping the funding down, imposing different frameworks for treatment requirements, et cetera, with a lot of that being restored. So there was a lot of uncertainty in that process, which required, there was a gap in funding because grants expired before these new awards finally were processed. And so that increased the risk for those losing housing as well. And for you all, as you are trying to use all of your resources to solve this issue. There were other federal pieces. VA announced a lot of position cuts, Medicaid cuts threatened the health services. COVID and recovery funds started to go away. So you're seeing just a lot of things happening on the federal front, which is creating a lot of uncertainty and a lot of a need to kind of pivot and rethink how to actually do this work. Another issue that was at the federal level was of course, the post-grants pass. A decision by the Supreme Court where, you know, there have been 320 ordinances introduced in 1 year past that decision. So a lot more focus on camping bans, criminalization, et cetera, as a solution for homelessness. So that's also in the background of the work. Always affordable housing can be a ceiling, whether that's access to housing that's already available or whether it's a lack of supply. Both of those issues are really front and center for most of us, most of the Americans in this country. Like, can we afford housing, and can we access what's available? And then I think the last piece of the kind of external environment scanning was to kind of understand, and this was Community Solutions also contracted with a couple of other research firms to understand public opinion and how that relates to homelessness response efforts. And sort of, some of the things that came out of that, about half of the people surveyed in that survey said that they don't really believe progress until they see fewer people on the street. So even if there are reductions happening, people aren't believing progress. At least half of the population is not believing progress unless they see fewer people, fewer encampments, et cetera. And there's a real lack of trust in government data and news coverage as well that kind of compounds that. Also, there was some research done with Gen I Earth, with Community Solutions, where it was trying to understand the messaging for the public. Sector language doesn't resonate. Encampments are distorting the overall narrative. Public demands visible and experiential proof. So all of these kind of external factors are sort of the waters in which we're swimming in now, and are sort of really have implications for how to move forward. A bright spot, though, is that even though people are skeptical about progress unless they see it, the vast majority of people believe that homelessness can be reduced. 91% of the folks in the survey said they think it can be reduced. 70% think it's fully solvable. So there is this kind of bright light to aim for. There is still some public will and some belief that this is possible. So we also provided a lot of insight back to Community Solutions from conversations with you all over the last couple of years in terms of what could be ways to really strengthen both the approach of Built for Zero, but also the supports and the ways to connect communities together so that they can build momentum. You can build momentum towards this work collectively, as well as at the local level. So there were things like really investigating, how we're measuring progress. Are we measuring the right set of progress? Is functional zero the right thing? Or are there other metrics to think about? And we also talked to you all about some of the community support, how Community Solutions was supporting. And there was a real desire for more specific, being responsive to more specific community contexts, that all of you are dealing with many issues that feel unique, and to align the support with where you are and what you're needing at the time. And also to help think about expanding out local efforts to include other partners in the community, business improvement districts, mayors, other coalitions, et cetera, to help take the burden off of the homeless response system, and also to create a more expansive approach. We also heard that narratives and public perceptions are a major barrier when we talk to you all. Media persistently covers homelessness through kind of a crisis lens, not a solutions lens, and that this was identified by a third of you that we talked to as a major barrier to being able to do the work you need to do. But narrative efforts in communities were pretty much ad hoc capacity. Most of you in the COCs and the efforts that you're doing don't have extra capacity to do large campaigns, to do that kind of messaging work, because you have to make the decision whether you want to trade off from the direct service, and go to more of these other external environment investments. And part of the conversation that we heard from communities was that it was important to have that kind of strategic communications, but there was not a lot of dedicated capacity to do that, which is something that Community Solutions has taken into thinking about in the way that they're thinking about doing the work moving forward. We also identified a similar issue with policy, that political will is often fragile because the leadership changes, and local efforts can be derailed really quickly by a change in administration. Those kinds of things. And so that's a factor to really be thinking about. And that there's a gap between policy ambitions and practice. Again, very few communities were doing a lot of advocacy, as you are again making decisions about where to put your efforts, and a lack of capacity to really make cases with elected officials, in many places. And those efforts, where they are happening, often being affected by these changes in leadership, et cetera. So there's an issue around sustainability, and how do we make sure that what's happening, what good things are happening, are continuing to happen even when the landscape shifts a little bit. And then I think the last kind of real set of insights was around the housing systems. This housing affordability, housing access, et cetera, was identified as the single most important factor that's slowing your progress. Having an ability to place people quickly in safe and affordable housing is a real challenge. It's not necessarily that there aren't units available. It may be that there are barriers to getting into those units, as we all know. It also means that there are fewer affordable units being produced on a regular basis. And the other issue I think that to think about is this issue of inflow into the system. We're seeing a large number of people entering homelessness for the first time. And so a lot of that is due to economic factors and increases in rent and cost of housing, that is pushing people out into the community. So there are a lot of kind of this focus on the external environment seem to be really as an important part of the work to focus on more deeply. Prior to our conversations, there was a lot of the focus of the evaluation was on strengthening the homeless response system itself, and having quality data and strategic partnerships and strong governance, et cetera. And in the evaluation, we were seeing a lot of movement towards the system level improvement and change. Where we did see a challenge and an opportunity was in this more external environment. So building on the really good work that has been happening within the homeless response system has opened up this opportunity to really be thinking about, how do we go beyond? Who else needs to be at the table? Who else should we bring on board? So that's a little bit of the summary, Rosanne, and I'm curious how you all have responded to some of that and what you're thinking about now and in the future for what that means for the work.
Terri, thank you. And one of the things we so appreciate about our collaboration is, I think, like us, and I'd say everyone on this call, we can both acknowledge all of the challenges and look for the openings and the opportunities for movement. And so one of the things maybe you might say a bit more about is with your insights, we set about really simplifying the Built for Zero theory of change to give more weight to these enabling conditions and to begin really, and this started even prior to our November learning session. I think anyone who was there probably noted that it was a place where we had housing advocates, where we had business improvement district leaders, we had folks who were working on creative financing, we had folks working on policy from different angles, we had folks who were movement leaders in other spaces. So we have begun this process of expanding the table, like who are the allies that communities will need to accelerate and protect the good work they're doing and to kind of continue to strengthen their system and the outcomes with the greater participation and kind of shared accountability of a greater array of local partners. So I don't know if there's anything you might want to note about what this simplified theory of change kind of guidance might, kind of be helpful for communities to understand. We can certainly keep circulating that, but we have gotten a lot clearer about, it's not simply what happens within the system, what happens around the work we're doing that we need to influence.
Yes, exactly. And I think what we see is that lots of good work is happening within the system. Um, People are being housed, services are being provided, and that is all hugely dependent upon the external environment. It's dependent upon the funding. It's dependent upon the political and public will. As soon as those things change, there's a risk of sustainability not happening. Um, and I think what this kind of push out to understanding these the enabling conditions as part of the theory of change is to recognize that political will and public will are critical to both momentum in the current state, but also in sustainability over time to bring people in the community together around actually doing, actually solving homelessness. It is important to engage them and their perceptions and to address that. It's important to engage policymakers because the policymakers are going to respond to the political will or the public will. If their constituents have a particular perception and a way of thinking about this, that's going to kind of flow through on the political side. Funding, of course, is really important, has always been important. But one of the things we found was that many communities are really reliant on federal funding. And there's an opportunity to expand and diversify that funding base also for sustainability so that when shocks come to the system financially, that things can keep going. And that requires broader partnerships, broader resource leveraging, et cetera. And then this issue of housing. Community Solutions has always focused on housing, and that's always been part of the theory of change. But this focus on really understanding how to both leverage the existing supply, uh, partner with organizations like developers, housing authorities, et cetera, who kind of hold the lever on changing what the supply and affordability look like. And so those pieces are really about providing a container for the really important work that you do to be sustainable and to have a larger impact, to sort of expand out, to scale out to the community at large. So it goes beyond just a single population, for example. It goes beyond just a programmatic approach that could go away if the program funding goes away, et cetera. So this idea of building the container, the external container in the community to really create the conditions for which the good work that you all are doing can be as powerful as it can be and be sustained over time.
Terri, you mentioned the additional research we commissioned, and it was an organization called Gen I Earth that did, I think, 75 individual interviews, like with thought leaders, journalists, like health system leaders, folks who are kind of were adjacent and kind of somewhat aware but not daily involved with the work of reducing homelessness. They pulled together, I think, 3 different workshops with different voices, including philanthropy, business leaders, as facilitators of kind of collective processes. And then we also commissioned last summer focus groups in three cities in Atlanta, Denver, and San Diego, and just extensive surveying as well of just I think the categories were civic leaders. So there was a kind of an over sampling of like small business leaders and kind of people who are involved in civic organizations, plus regular voters, and also each of these focus groups and survey pools involved a very carefully curated ranges of political views, based on voting patterns. And it was striking. And I think this is, maybe you could just say a word about how you reacted to this, having heard from communities about how uh, underwater they felt on communications and, kind of partnership development. It was really striking to see that overwhelmingly folks who are responding in these contexts believe that homelessness can be reduced. There are all of these kind of like debates about what can it be ended. No, everyone agrees it can be reduced. So yeah, and we were hearing that even kind of sort of insisting on some of our language was potentially a barrier for folks who really
Mhm.
are with us and saying can be reduced, is a top priority. It's interesting that quite by a large margin, uh, voters were saying it's the job of local government to solve this, but they need
Mhm.
everybody's help. And we don't necessarily trust local government to do it. So we're back to this trust factor. And as you mentioned earlier, um, it's like no amount of just data or like pronouncements from the not-for-profit and government sector is really going to be trustworthy if people don't see change in the conditions of unsheltered homelessness. And so that was just so like in our face as we got this
Mhm.
research back. But my sense reading like the year three report and your insights from the year four conversations is that our communities are seeing the same thing, that they need support and communications, they need new allies,
Mhm.
and they need a new story, and they need more insight around how to tell it and what will be persuasive. But anything you can offer from your conversations with communities, I think would be interesting to know.
Yeah, so I do think heard across the board in our interviews that we did with communities that the public the public perception was really important. There
Mhm.
were a few communities where public perception was very supportive, and they
Mhm.
cited that as a very much
Mhm.
an enabling factor for being able to do the work they do. But for the most part, communities talked about it being a real challenge
Mhm.
to combat, especially in a world where our media every night, our television every night is treating it
Mhm.
as a crisis moment. The
Mhm.
message that we're being bombarded with is it's a crime issue, it's a drug issue, it's a
Mhm.
safety issue, um, and combating that kind of drumbeat of
Mhm.
kind of negative
Mhm.
story and coverage is a real challenge.
Mhm.
And I think then, even identifying that as a challenge, having the capacity and the knowledge to actually change that. I agree, Roseanne. There's a sort of a sense of we aren't communications experts. We are homeless response experts,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
we really need help
Mhm.
to help change that narrative.
Mhm.
Um, Again, the messaging definitely that we heard that the most successful changes to public perception were being able to change the way it was messaged.
Mhm.
One
Mhm.
community talked about, we don't talk about we talk about everything in plain language. We depoliticize everything. And so in
Mhm.
our conversations, we don't use words that might offset, activate reactions. We talk about our community. We are a community together. We should be taking care of each other. And they leaned into that as a really important part of the work, to make it possible
Mhm.
to make the reductions and make the progress they had.
Mhm.
Um, but there was a sensitivity there to
Mhm.
thinking about the messaging in particular,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
to their community, to
Mhm.
bring their community along.
Mhm. Great. Well, Terri, thank you for grounding us in kind of the ground truth. Here's what is out there. Here are the real challenges in terms of policy, housing scarcity, kind of an incredulous and sometimes hostile narrative. Um, I'll start, maybe describing some of the ways we have pivoted. Some, moves already underway, others on the horizon, in response to what you've shared with us in our own interaction with, these amazing community leaders. And we have really tried to stay close to and, creative about what seemed most actionable in the information that you've gathered. First, we know that we need to lean into the news story. This in the fall, we hired a new communications and campaign team to begin actually working with this information and with communities around who needs to be at the table and how do we educate folks even within a given community to share a story of what is working and to lean into progress. I think part of what we learned in this communications research is the way that I think we in the sector have tended to talk about like what is true is to point out that our work is under threat. There's not enough housing, not enough money, and the very, just unambiguous feedback was that's demotivating. You're not building confidence. Yeah, like if you want to bring partners along, if you want to, infuse confidence in the people in your community whose support you need to talk about what's working. And I hope folks have noticed that our really terrific team of Katie Stasa and Lisa Tran, our social media is all about what's working. Yeah, like we are just really leaning into this overwhelming evidence that we need to lift up what's working. And the key messages also, we did ask these focus groups, and we had like a national firm do these. It wasn't just us kind of winging it. It was very rigorous. And what overwhelmingly in these three communities across different party lines, the winning message is making homelessness rare and brief is good for our whole community. Like that is the story to plug into. And so we are in our work doing that, lifting up the work, not just of Built for Zero communities, as any community, kind of registers a success. And so we are building the capacity, and Claire Caldwell and Brian Jones, I think, are here on the call, our communications and campaign team, who are developing these products and the relationships. We're piloting them in certain places and with the intention of as things take hold and some of the local tools can be put in toolkit form and we can provide some light touch support. We'll be spreading more of that infrastructure. But the power of being on the same page with a story of possibility and progress is, I think, our collective of job in terms of ways we can reshape the enabling conditions. Second, we realize we absolutely need to lean into unsheltered homelessness and look for ways to speed the pace of linking people to housing. And I think probably most of you have received invitations from us through our collaborative team here to participate in a one-day training and on a virtual training that Clutch Consultants is offering. We have formed a partnership with Clutch this year because they have really cracked the code about how to mobilize efforts and where unsheltered homelessness is driving the conversation, even if all sorts of other things are going in the right direction. And the Clutch team is working with us to help communities who have put their hands up saying, we want to focus on this. Like, how do we help take their model and make it available to more communities? Because it's both about showing visible, rapid progress in reducing unsheltered homelessness, but also using the existing housing that is available in the market. Like, two things are sadly true at once. We don't have enough housing, but we're not using all of the housing assets we have. And I think I've become a total believer in the Clutch relationship. seeing in many communities, there's kind of like, oh yeah, like there are enough housing units. We just have to buy our way into the market. So it means raising some additional private funds to enable that process and not simply being kind of in our usual zone of just like waiting for waiting lists to turn over. So if you have not attended one of those Clutch one-day trainings, they're incredibly inspiring and invigorating, and especially if you can bring, as Terri pointed out, like someone from the business community, someone from local philanthropy, someone from the mayor's office to see, like, wait a minute, there is a way we can get started, and it's just going to require a new kind of partnership, a new kind of mental model, which is not to wait for the perfect, but to get started, take action, and begin to demonstrate to like our skeptical neighbors that we can actually make progress here. So we are, as we kind of work with communities in Built for Zero network who have put their hands up to say this is their priority. We are, part of our job over the next several months is capturing the learning and kind of spreading it. But really encourage any of you who are faced with this kind of challenge. Not every community is facing significant unsheltered homelessness, but if you are, this is important to the story of progress, to the story of credibility, to changing the enabling conditions, as well as to delivering much more rapidly life-saving housing help to people who are experiencing homelessness. And then one of the things that we are also getting very kind of crisp about, and Terri, I'll just give you and your team credit. You've been pointing out to us the feedback from communities that our partners in communities are looking for more flexibility and differential support. Like in the past, it's like, are you working on veterans homelessness? Are you working on chronic homelessness? Are you working on youth homelessness? And folks are like, we actually have a different set of broader priorities that we would like to, be in conversation and find tools for and be in a cohort kind of relationship with. And so we are standing up and this regular series of town halls, the clutch trainings, other things that we are producing are part of what we're rolling out this year, which we're calling the Collaborative Plus. And this is led by Steve Simons, and you'll see Alyssa Mandel and like Keta Rooser are all part of that team. But we are in the midst of selecting an open source platform partner to work with. We already have just created, with your help and by our team codifying this, about 80 different tools, trainings ready to put online for anyone's use, not just folks who are formally part of Built for Zero, but anyone seeking solutions. But it's very much our intention, and this is like a direct appeal, help us. Over the years, I've spoken to so many community leaders who have developed tools, have developed reports, have developed training protocols to bring partners in the faith community or in business along. We want this to be bi-directional. And if you have tools that you can share with the group, like we want to kind of collectively populate this and just really ramp up our collective ability to make evidence-based, evidence-informed, even emerging tools and practices available to anyone seeking them. And that's a project that's underway now. And I would say probably by September, we'll have a platform identified. But if you can begin thinking about what would be helpful to you, asynchronous learning, cohort-based planning, having access to a range of tools, light touch coaching, these kinds of introductory seminars that Clutch and others can provide, that's all part of the mix. And so that is a response. Terri also mentioned that communities, and I've been on calls with some of you in the last few months, and this has been echoed. Functional zero, absolutely the holy grail, but we need a wider array of progress measures because it requires doing a translation. As Terri was saying, we got to be a lot more attuned to speaking in kind of terms that are more generic. And so Adam Rugi and our team are looking at what are the other progress measures that communities can have and be working toward that translate into like public health or other audiences, like prevalence, for instance, as a percentage of overall population, how many individuals are experiencing homelessness or unsheltered homelessness. So we are absolutely taking on board this question, this actual frustration that folks have expressed that the having a single measure is not adequate with such a dynamic and complex and nuanced issue. And then, not necessarily lastly, but this is the other kind of big bucket of work. As Lori mentioned at the beginning, and Terri has mentioned, there is, I think, an unusual opportunity, and yeah, the for all of the chaos, yeah, it has, I think, had an awakening effect on local leaders in different sectors that if they want their communities to work, if they want to solve hard problems, they have to be more like ground up and local, efforts. And so we have found in the last, and I would say beginning last fall, we really started testing the waters. But groups like the International Downtown Association, pro-housing organizations, groups, meaning like changing housing policies at the state level to enable the kind of housing production needed, think tanks that are working on for instance, how do we make modular housing or conversions of commercial to residential much more straightforward? Not only have we found like that at the community solutions level, people are excited to have voices representing, and here's how you make this relevant to folks experiencing or at risk of homelessness. But we're realizing that many of these organizations, they have local members, local chapters, local allies, and part of our focus this year is to introduce them to you. We're finding like business improvement districts in particular and health systems there is perhaps a new moment and a new way of inviting them into being part of the conversation and part of really targeted local efforts to start demonstrating momentum toward making homelessness rare and brief. And that this is also a moment where some of the federal partners, the mix is changing. There's conversations, and I think this is true locally as well. Folks who may not have thought about homelessness as their priority, who are prepared to see it as evidence of how do we make our communities work better? How do we make government more effective? How do we restore trust in each other's ability to work on hard problems together? And we are finding that framed that way as like it's an exercise in community collaboration, we are getting much more interest in people looking at this issue as what we all know it is. It's not about the individual. It's about the community systems that are failing our most vulnerable neighbors. And so we are seeing this moment of opportunity to broaden partnerships locally and nationally. And so we are eager to be in touch with you if you have particularly like would like to figure out who the business groups in your community are and who might be helpful and what are the messages that seem to resonate. Health systems that have been frustrating to deal with. We now have a pretty good playbook of how to get those folks involved. And so I'm going to stop there, in terms of my like response to like, so how have we reacted to the ORS insights? But Terri, I'd love your take on like, does this make sense? We have tried, to be very faithful to what we're hearing from communities and what,
Yes.
what we are hearing from would-be allies about how to help meet the moment. But I'd love your reflection on that.
No, I think that's right, Rosanne. And I think not only in this context, but in a lot of other contexts that we work in a lot of different social sectors. We're hearing very similar things that
Mhm,
um, this moment has caused a lot of disruption and a lot of opportunity at the same time. Opportunity to rethink how our systems work and how we work together.
mhm,
So I think it makes a lot of sense
mhm,
to really step back and say, how can we do this together?
mhm,
My experience has been in the education world where, schools are
mhm,
beleaguered and embattled and all of the things, right, by the community. And in successful efforts for educational reform, what you see is the community coming together,
mhm,
the community taking ownership, the community saying, these are our people, these are our
mhm,
kids. And I think a similar kind of approach here is
mhm,
definitely the right direction, right? I think we are going to solve these problems
Mhm.
collectively together on the ground in our communities in a really place-based way that will take into account the uniquenesses of each community, the uniquenesses of the people who are experiencing homelessness and the situations that we have in place. So it does make a lot of sense. It aligns with lots of other sort of these
Mhm.
kinds of efforts to move towards collectivity and building together.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, I'm curious if there are things, Terry, that based on what you're seeing with, other efforts you're evaluating and, conversations you've had with both folks here in the Built for Zero network or, who are also working on kind of community-based systems problems. Are there things that we should be doing or consider doing that we're not?
I think in a lot of these efforts, there is a clear mechanism for collaboration
Hmm.
and engagement. So if you think about the collective impact world, there is
Hmm.
there's a common agenda. The people who have an interest come around the table
Hmm.
to agree to work together, which is very, the same thing
Hmm.
that's happening in the theory of change.
Hmm.
Um, and a place to put in, mutually reinforcing activities, having the voices of the folks the most affected, helping guide what's happening,
Hmm.
bringing in the engagement of the people who can actually leverage and influence the system,
Hmm.
and bringing them along.
Hmm.
So this idea that it's not just one agenda, it's not just one program, it's not just one thing,
Hmm.
but coming together collectively to say, here's what we want to solve together.
Hmm.
Here are the voices that are helping us understand that issue, that
Hmm.
challenge that we are solutioning for,
Hmm.
and really thinking about where are the leverage points in the community
Hmm.
that can help that happen. And it might not be the same in every community.
Hmm.
In one community, it might be activating local funders. In one
Hmm.
community, it might be really bringing the mayor's office along. I mean, so there are a lot of levers, I think, that open up when you expand out into this more enabling conditions model
Hmm.
than the homeless response system has, or any social, system has. The work is just amplified and
Hmm.
deepened when you can expand that out, and people are working together towards
Yeah.
it.
One of the things I'll observe, and maybe you have similar, experiences, that the communities that are part of the Built for Zero network, who are so focused on having data that really tells them how their system is working, that this, data about like what is true, what's getting outcomes, is a a very powerful, almost way of communicating into different spaces. That and in some of the meetings I've been in, and kind of some surprising communities and surprising voices of like, what do we have to do to solve this? Um, a focus on outcomes as opposed to like, why do you care about this issue? But a focus on outcomes, an ability to share kind of a common view about like whether we're making progress or not. I'm beginning to see how powerful that is for cutting through partisanship and, kind of some of the things
Mhm.
that have made progress hard. But are you seeing anything that reinforces like my recent experiences?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think information is critical.
Hmm.
Information that is packaged in ways that people can access it and consume it is
Hmm.
even more important.
Hmm.
Data on the political front will
Hmm.
cut through a lot of noise, as will stories. So I
Yeah.
think there's this balance also between really good concrete data that shows progress and contextualizing that with the stories
Hmm.
of success, especially when you're talking about bringing the public along.
Hmm.
The public tends to be emotionally driven, right?
Hmm.
That's the hook
Hmm.
that media plays,
Hmm.
and to show the public, it may be the showing of the stories of success. To convince a policymaker who has to make investments, showing the data showing. So there are these, I think both of those things are important to play together and kind of figure out by audience
Hmm.
which is the most compelling
Hmm.
combination of data and story
Mhm.
to move things forward. And I think that's important to think about.
Your point about showing success, I mean, one of the things that, our team has been thinking about is one of the most powerful stories of success on a national basis, like hasn't really been told, which is the reduction in veteran homelessness and what it's taken. That is, as I think, we always thought from the very beginning when, during the Obama administration, that you saw the real commitment to adequately and sustainably funding a path to solution on veteran homelessness. Like we thought that could be the entree for showing that all homelessness is rare and brief. Now that this has remained a bright spot, uh, you'd think that there'd be marching bands, but this story of like how has this happened and how do we make the leap to like like what made it possible for this to happen to make it happen everywhere. I do feel that that is uh, an opportunity, and
Mhm.
in fact, our communications campaign team is working on an outline for something we think could be really powerful, which almost a call to action. I mean, maybe it's a 100,000
Mhm.
homes vibe, which is complete the mission of ending veteran homelessness, and
Mhm.
that it's about like doing more what we already have learned how to do, and then do it for everyone. And so it would be, to your point, Terri, it's not just about like we have the data to show it, but it would be a terrific project for us, collectively here to collaborate on and surfacing individual and community stories of, what has made this possible. Not just individual stories, as important as they are, but like there seems to be a hunger in this credibility space for, well, how did it happen? And so, I think this year we'd love to be in touch with folks, or just even if you have compelling stories, to be in touch with our comms team. We are very eager to just lift up any individual or community-wide story, but also, with this sense of how do we tell this story of possibility on veteran homelessness, and really push that as the overall proof point that, communities are seeing success.
Mhm.
Um, I know we want to begin opening up any questions from the audience here, and actually, yeah, members of our community solutions team who can point out things that I've forgotten to mention. But Terri, is there any, yeah, I want to come back to you by the end because we're starting this all important kind of final year evaluation. And this, as you and your team talk to our communities, and it's probably like a half hour, 45-minute call, but this is so important for us to try to nail it. Like, what have we learned that we can share with the country? And it's a very powerful feedback loop for us. Like what additional support would be helpful? What do you have to contribute that we're not, maybe aware of or inviting you to share? And so we would really love to get as much participation as possible. And maybe Terri, you could share like what an ideal participation rate or experience would look like in terms of the next and final evaluation.
Yeah, Roseanne. So we are, as Roseanne said, embarking on our last round of data collection. And we're hoping to talk to or have as many communities as possible complete some surveying data collection.
Mhm,
So we have a combination of interviews and surveys that we'll be
mhm,
putting out. Um, we're trying to be, lessons learned for us. We're trying to be as sensitive to burden as we can.
mhm,
But
mhm,
some of you might get calls from Rosanne and Lori or us about, can we have a conversation? Do you have other folks in your community that we could have a conversation with? Others of you may get a survey later in the year about how has this experience been for you? What has it helped you do? Um, most of these asks will come over the next several months between June and September, so you might expect to hear that. And I think, we will probably come back to the collaborative some time later in the summer to sort of talk a little bit more about what we're hearing and what we still would like to hear. But we just invite you to, use that opportunity to tell the stories. And really be able to tell the story of how this work has helped us really move the needle on homelessness and what still needs to happen
Mhm.
to make that rare and brief and moving forward. So just want to extend that invitation and let you know that we really value all of the perspectives that we get in helping us tell that story. And in the story that Rosanne was talking about, veterans, for example, we're going to go deeper into that and try to elevate that and amplify that out in terms of like some of the impacts. So if there are other stories like that that you all are seeing, again, not just to the communications folks, but we are very interested as well to be able to elevate what has been happening and what the successes are, as well as what are the opportunities and things to move forward to think about differently.
Well, thank you, Terry. And let's open it up to any questions. Some folks had sent questions in earlier, and I hope we've tried to we've tried to hit some of them. I know Lori did. Like there's a whole series of these town halls. We'll be sharing the topics. This collection of evidence-based practices that will go in the collaborative plus. Yeah, please help us populate that. And I think Steve and the team will be in touch about how you can be kind of an active contributor. Um, uh, Touched on the policy space a bit, but please just chime in with other questions in the chat or I think Alyssa, do you want to try to curate this in some way to make sure we don't overlook anyone?
Roseanne, I can pull up
Okay.
one question. And oops, and now I've just lost it. But there was perhaps maybe even a little bit of a deeper dive into regional coordination. And I think this also might come from some of our people who are working a little bit more at the regional or state level. How can that actually drive reductions in results in homelessness? What are we learning and
Yeah.
identifying as opportunities there?
That is such a good question. And I neglected to lift up, Terry, that you, in the year 4 evaluation, you and your team really highlighted the promise of the state and regional work. And that,
Mhm.
more and more, organizations and levels of government working together as kind of a critical future direction. But maybe you could say more about that.
Mhm. Yeah, so one of the things we did surface in the evaluation was the power of these more regional or state networks,
Mhm.
primarily in terms of
Mhm.
supporting and helping create enabling conditions.
Mhm.
Um, so there's more power in a regional collaboration, for example, to influence policy, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
There's more power when the state and the local policy environment and those sorts of things are aligned. Um, but it also creates an opportunity to learn across communities. When you are not in isolation, you're actually
Mhm.
part of a larger collaborative situation that's happening regionally. So, for example, spent a lot of time talking to Zach about the work in Colorado and how to set up a system that can support all communities in the state and bringing them together and convening, having common data across, et cetera, allows for different kinds of conversations to happen. Those partnerships at the state level also can have different leverage points and influence ability based on bringing in agencies that are working on adjacent issues and how can we collaborate and work together to leverage the limited resources we have to solve the issues that we have. So we will be digging a little bit more into the state work this year as well. So we'll be talking to the Built for Zero states who are actively working on this to try to continue to surface lessons about how states can best support communities. And in some of the communities that we'll be talking with you, some of you also have regional collaborations that we want to learn more about. And what that looks like. Metro Denver is an example. There's a region, a little bit of a collaboration in Detroit, the Detroit area among counties, and trying to understand what are the opportunities that arise from that, and what are some of the things to look for to avoid, or to strengthen for that to be successful.
Mhm. I think one thing, just to piggyback on that, Terry, that I think was flagged as a question to dig more deeply into this year is within our large scale change team that supports the state work and is intending to grow and expand to other states and is now housed our health systems work. And it's a small but mighty team working on how do we get, especially for those with complex needs and where, the health system can be an active partner, payer, how do we get the health systems actually integrated into the work communities are doing? And that often makes the greatest amount of sense at the regional level, kind of map on a hospital service area. And so I think that folks should be aware that we are looking to see how that part of the work can play a more direct role in helping communities drive reductions, optimize resources, support regional strategies.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they also play a very a very important role in the prevention work, right?
Mhm.
Which is the
Yeah.
other side of this equation.
Mhm.
It's not just housing people, it's keeping them from being
Mhm.
housed. And so one of the things we'll dig into is how can cross-sector partnerships like with healthcare
Mhm.
really support that side of the equation as well? And what does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the origins of that work, and it's been kind of most happening most deeply in the Sacramento area and the Portland, Oregon area, and now in Durham, North Carolina, is like every health system knows that they have a role to play, but how to play it well, yeah, like as has been, I think, the big question. And so I think there's so much um, knowledge that is emerging in these kind of trial sites. We've recently, our team has created some training tools, and there was a recent webinar, especially, on health systems, homelessness systems, and older adults. But that is an area where I think it would be super helpful. Anyone on this call, like if this is a question you're wrestling with, where to go next with the designing the trainings and what have you, or even helping you reach out to healthcare systems with more specific asks about the role that you'd like them to play is something that we'd love to be in touch about. Lori, are there other questions?
There are, but why don't I just take a second? If we'll give priority to folks in the room right now as well. If you have a question, please put your hand up, and you can go off mic and ask it. If you're a little bit shyer, you can do it in the chat. But we really are here to hear everyone's voices, so encourage you to raise your hand, and we'll give you the Zoom mic. But while we're waiting for that. There's a question on sustaining gains, and I love it because it's also a question about best practices. And so, of course, we can turn that question also into a call for you are our source of best practices, and also as ORS looks at the next set of conversations, this is exactly the sort of question we want to probe, which is after we've gotten success through our Built for Zero partnership, and some of us have even gotten to zero with a subpopulation, what are the best practices to maintain that level and not backslide? So really, with all the pressures we have right now, what are we seeing and learning and hearing about how to sustain the work? And I suspect, Terri, there's an element of the new theory of change in the answer too. So maybe I'll ask you to start, Terri.
Yeah, so I do think going back to the kind of the earlier parts of the conversation, this idea of expanding partnership and collaboration beyond the homeless response system is going to be critical. Having cross-sector partners who can influence or bring resources from other parts of the system is important. I think another issue around sustainability is on the sort of thinking on the funding side, making sure that as much as possible that the funds are diversified and flexible. And we've seen when the federal government sort of can't, provide that support, that opens up other opportunities, it opens up challenges. So I think those two feel like really important parts of sustainability. Um, Something within the system, I think one of the things we heard a lot about was the sort of the effect of leadership transition. And so finding ways to institutionalize what's happening so that the system is more resilient to those leadership transitions is really important. Somebody needs to hold the knowledge moving forward. We found in several of our conversations over the last several years that great momentum would be happening, and then the leader would leave and change, and things just came to a stop. So that seems like a really big within system issue to address. I think capacity is another one, and not just more, but more targeted capacity for certain roles or certain kinds of work, and then the supports to develop those folks who are doing that work, to be able to continue to develop their skill sets, et cetera. Thinking about them in terms of overburden and overwork as well. We know that our direct line workers are often the ones that experience the most stress and burnout because of the pressure and just the situation that's happening. So I think those kind of the capacity and leadership within, and then this expansion to cross sector and really thinking about the funding are the kind of themes that came out of our evaluation in terms of sustainability.
Oh. All right. I have a siren in the house, but there was a question, perhaps even a little bit tactical, but I'll also share that there was a recent thread on the Homeless Hub Facebook page that had its origins actually in the 100,000 Homes campaign. Coordinated entry. What are we learning? You know, what might we need to think about with coordinated entry as we work to sustain the gains we've made, and also work to tackle visible pain points in our communities. Anything, Rosanne or Terri, on coordinated entry that you think we should continue to learn and explore?
Terri, do you have an official data-informed answer to that question? Because I can just say what I'm hearing from a lot of communities, but if you've asked that question, let's start with you and some like research tested response.
Yeah, so I will say just very briefly that when we've asked communities what are some of the core drivers to progress, a strong coordinated entry system is one that rises up as being really important, and that makes sense because it's a system level thing that's happening where you're bringing people together. You're bringing your people aren't falling through the cracks because everyone who's working is coming together. So we did hear that coordinated entry was a really strong driver of being able to make progress on housing people who are experiencing homelessness.
Um, what I've heard from several communities, and as early as this, as recently as earlier this morning, is it is a barrier. And maybe this is about like a well-run or just a well-greased coordinated entry system is a, a partner to success. One that has a lot of friction in it is a real problem. And a lot of communities, I think, are sort of whispering like the only progress we're making is when we go around it. And so it has been, I meant to tell you, this should be a question on the next evaluation schedule, Terri, because this the inadequacy or the clunkiness of the existing coordinated entry systems is coming up very consistently as a big problem for communities moving folks out of homelessness.
Great. I know there's questions out there, so please don't be shy. And as you can see, we won't shy away from any difficult or other questions. Maybe I'll lift one up from also that we got prior, which is actually related to prevention. What are we learning about prevention? And in this moment, I'll sort of add a little twist to the question. How do we also do prevention work in a way that ensures real lifetime results and kind of contributes, Rosanne, to what we are hearing and learning about narrative change? Big questions.
Rosanne, I can start from the evaluation perspective.
Yeah, that would be great, Terri, because I would just be like sharing, like, here's what I'm seeing. So let's start with what
Yeah.
actually has been studied.
Yeah, so we in year three we did kind of try to understand a little bit about more how prevention plays into this, and that was a result of our year two evaluation where it was surfaced that prevention was a critical but often missing piece of the kind of the system that was happening or was happening in ways that were disconnected. And we began to see communities who were collaborating with healthcare, with law enforcement, with other sector adjacent organizations to really think about creative solutions for prevention, changing policies or guidelines, to help, um, you know, divert folks rather than like have them on the street, those sorts of things, and the importance of that. That's another area that we'll be digging a little bit more deeply into in this round of conversations with communities because it felt like it was pretty new and developing. People were starting to talk about it and see it as really a really critical aspect of the work, especially as COVID ended and the eviction protections went away. We started to see a lot higher inflow rates, et cetera. And so the conversation around prevention became a really much more important one. And as part of the theory of change on the back end for the evaluation, we are interested in sort of how the the conditions in the theory of change actually set up the programmatic work to be effective. Like how does, do you have a good mix of preventative versus reactive strategies, for example? And that we found that tends to lead to better outcomes in terms of housing people and bringing that number down. So I think there's more to learn, and it definitely was surfaced as a really important piece that is, I think, more and more becoming part of the conversation and part of the system. But at the time when we really were talking to communities about it, was felt a little bit like there were opportunities there to really build that alignment and integration with other partners in that space.
Good. Yeah, I just would say there are a couple of interesting things because this, as it should be, is an emerging large question and kind of what are the different tools needed? I mean, I don't think there is yet anything that offers itself as a comprehensive strategy, but um, the New York Times has continued on with their Headway series on like promising practices in homelessness, and they have highlighted, for example, how Hartford, Connecticut does diversion as something that is noteworthy. The I think Urban Institute has lifted up Philadelphia's eviction prevention program. There's right now, I think 10 cities. A destination home from San Jose received a grant to work with 10 cities on their right at home prevention model, which is there's absolutely a model there, but it's very flexible, like to the city. So those are some of the things we're tracking, but I don't think there's anything, and probably like something that Built for Zero is built for, like no one answer, but how do you contain it in kind of a coherent, easily accessible, trackable system for making homelessness rare and brief?
Great. I
All right,
think,
any other
uh,
calls, or
uh,
maybe it's time to just say what to
yeah,
expect next?
I think what to expect next. Yes, that would be where we would go. And again, if you chew and have questions, just you can always reach out and um, we will follow up. And this will all be posted, of course. So, Alyssa.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Just a few announcements to round out the call. We do have our June town hall date, where we'll be discussing data disaggregation and a guide our team has created to sort of discuss system inequities. And that call is going to be June 23rd. I don't believe we've narrowed down a time, but it'll either be at noon or 1. So keep your eyes out for our next newsletter. So save the date. And we really appreciate you being here. We appreciate the discussions that we get to have on these calls with you all. So please just take a moment to share your feedback. We are always looking for the most important topics that are top of mind for our communities. So when you fill out this survey, if you have ideas for a future town hall, don't be shy. Please let us know what is going to be the most useful so that we can make these calls, the best use of everybody's time. And thanks so much. We really are so grateful that you all could take this hour and a half to be with us.